we drink negative charged water is that the cells in our body operate at their fullest potential with a negative charge. So a cell at a steady state or resting state would be about negative 25 millivolts. To make a new cell, it has to go to negative 50 millivolts. Now, you can only make a new cell at an optimal level if you've got that charge. So once you start depleting the charge of your cells, and your body energy then falls, down towards zero or positive charge, you are in the disease zone. The only thing that's going to protect you from disease is to maintain the negative charge of your cells. And the fastest way to do that is with water.
Rob, thank you so much for back on the show. In our last episode, we covered a lot of ground to do with structured water and all the benefits to do with structured water. And you're just back from the water conference, which was in Lisbon in Portugal. And you were just saying before we started that had a great attendance.
Yes, this was an excellent conference. Some very good speakers across a whole range of sciences in the area of water energy and structure. And of course, different people doing different things with the water. But the usual people were there, like Professor Pollock, Professor Karakov, Beverly Rubik, and others. So it was nice to catch up with these people and to talk. We normally only get to meet each other once a year, although we have smaller conferences in between. Look, a very good turnout too, about 150 people, a mix of people. Some were visitors who have an interest in the structure of water, but most were people who are involved in the water industry and, or involved specifically in water structured science.
Yeah. I think it's just really highlighting the growing interest as well in these, what we can still deem as alternative forms of treatment for health, even though spring water is not an alternative form of treatment. I'd say it's the main form of treatment that we should be looking at. And I was listening yesterday to how back in the early 1900s, they were how you'd have, if you were sick, you'd go somewhere in the mountains in Europe, for example, and they lay you out in day beds in the sunlight and give you lots of spring water and rest to heal all kinds of ailments. And we're going full circle, and that was sort of pushed off to the side when pharmaceutical companies started to take control of healthcare. And thankfully, that information is now becoming more widespread of just the absolute benefits of light and water for health.
Oh, there's no doubt we're probably all got ancestors who drank what we now know as healing water. So any water that is pristine, and most of our ancestors lived by the banks of flowing streams and drank structured water. And in many cases, this water was known as healing water. It seemed to heal. And in fact, I have a bore on my property that actually produces this water. It actually comes out of the ground with a permanent negative charge on it, and it's blue in colour. It has all the characteristics of structured water. So I also put a charge into it, but you're right. And once water was revered for its healing capacity and its spiritual or cultural, links. So, I mean, this is why baptisms were done once in flowing streams. But there are healing waters globally, and, we do have some in Australia, but, that idea was squashed by a couple of professors at the University of New South Wales who thought it was all pseudoscience stuff. But I've now done the research on this work, and I know that this water does exist. And, it's what we call holy water or sacred water. And that's why when I met Karakov and a few others, scientists in Europe, Karakov in 2008 and these other scientists in 2010, they said to me that the holy grail of water was to put a permanent negative charge into distilled water, because most of the water people were drinking had a positive charge. So that's what I succeeded in doing. And basically, in just changing the polarity of water, you take water back to its natural state, and that's where you get the healing properties of water, and particularly important for your blood, providing energy to your blood. So you're right. We've lost over the centuries this close association our ancestors had with water.
Well, so much to do with the natural world, which was innate healer, we've dismissed in favour of disease sort of cover up or management, as opposed to actually getting to the root cause, which has caused the illness in the first place. But on the positive side, there's so much interest in moving back to actually understanding the underpinnings of what vitality and health are. And
definitely. I mean, big water and big chemical and big engineering will strive, to maintain their $1 trillion industry. But that water is dead water, and it's probably poisoning people and probably a major cause of disease. There is a greater understanding now by people that we need to drink water in its most natural form and drink destruction water. So you can do it a number of ways. You can just go and drink from a pristine stream, or find water that is what we call holy water. Or you can use a device like my MEA water device to put a permanent negative charge into the water and convert it back to its natural energetic state. This movement is increasing rapidly, and we just know because of our sales overseas that it's increasing at a significant pace. And there's an understanding and a wanting of people to look at the science of structured water. And that's why I've developed a PowerPoint I can now send to people, which gives them the understanding of the science and the experimental work I've done and the evidence. And we can, at workshops, I go into more detail about the health benefits. Because as you know, in Australia and probably in a lot of other countries, you've got to be very careful about making claims about therapeutic claims. And, to make it about water is like heresy to a lot of these agencies. So I do cover this in my workshops, but I can't put this up publicly.
Well, I'm not going to throw you under the bus, Rob, but I'm happy to sound off on a number of this stuff, because it makes my blood boil in how it's reported on and the clear impacts it has on people's health, and how it's widely ignored by allopathic medicine and government bodies at large. And we have a chronic health epidemic, which could be somewhat completely nullified by returning us to eating and drinking the correct nutrition and the correct waters that we should be. I thought would be, before I dive into that, because I want to mention there was a whole bunch of articles that came out in this country, in Australia, to do with the drinking water and the absolute diabolical state of carcinogens and microplastics that were found in all Australian drinking water, and even unfortunately, in a lot of the underground bore water too. It's permeated into our natural springs. But as well, just to give a quick arc to what we'll be discussing today, I thought it would be great to ask the questions which I had this morning from a person at the market, in terms of they listened to the first episode that we had, which I'll link in the show notes here for people who haven't heard that. But she had a number of questions, which I thought would be great just to cover those, because there was some fundamental questions that a lot of people I've had ask me, and you're the expert. I'd like to find out on that. But firstly, look, if anyone is skeptical to do with anything we're talking about today and the benefits, just Google recent findings. I think they came out in June or July, to do with waters, ostensibly in most of the world, but in Australia, up until these findings were published, most people would think that the water we were drinking from the tap was fine. They might say, oh, it tastes different in different states, and so on. But these papers were from government bodies. So it's not some fringe people out there claiming this stuff. This has come from the government, and it has found that there are carcinogens in the water, which is to say cancer-causing agents. So why this is not more mainstream and we're not instantly trying to find a rectify it is beyond me.
Well, you're right. This information is certainly out there now, and my office is getting called almost every day on this very topic. There's now a far greater awareness about the toxins that are in water. And the reason that they're there is because the current way that we treat water, which is a chemical approach, just adds to the issue. We're just adding chemical into chemicals. Now, if you look at the way that water does this in nature, I mean, water is self-cleaning. This has been known probably for centuries. So we can simply solve this issue at a government level just by changing the polarity of the water. Ditch the whole chemical processing process. And I know this makes a lot of money for, for water corporates and engineers and all the consultants and people involved in maintaining these very expensive systems. But if you just change the polarity of the water in that state has so many unique properties, that people would be consuming water that would then be beneficial to their health. At the moment, it's detrimental to their health. However, getting government to just make that simple change and throw out, the very extensive urban water systems it's not an easy thing. But we could start, at a village level, and do it there. I certainly think in Aboriginal communities, they have some of the worst drinking water on this planet. We could certainly change things for them because the bore water they've been given is like undrinkable. So they then go to drinking soft drinks or booze or something or other to try and get some fluids in because the water is undrinkable. So there's very small steps we could take, using very inexpensive systems, the MEA water one, and just change the polarity and make this water potable. Now, that requires some understanding about the science of structured water. And because the people who run those systems are not turning up at the water conferences that I go to about the energy and structure of water. So
no,
there's a big learning curve required here. But it is possible. And I think we have enough proof now to show that we can change the water that people drink. Otherwise, people have got to go and source pristine water. So where I live, I guess local people can go to the river that I live on, the Mongalo, and get our pristine water and take it home and drink it. But not everyone has access to pristine water. So there's got to be another way.
Okay, so that's what I would like to jump into is for people who don't have access to pristine water. Firstly, though, I'd like to ask you as a foundational question, why is it important to have a negative charge in your water? For like, what's a layman's explanation for people who will be like, well, I don't understand why I would need a positive or a negative charge in.
Well, the science of this has been known since at least the 1920s by Russian scientists who were producing, getting a negative charge back into water. So what we do know is that when water is flowing in a pristine stream, it has a negative charge. And Schauberger found this. So in a paper he wrote in 1930, he said when they straightened out the Rhine and the Danube and many other river systems in Germany to straighten them out for shipping, he basically said that the water lost its insulation, that is capacity to hold charge. and the water changed from a negative charge to a positive charge. He said that in 1930. And he said, as a result of that, the water lost its magnetic levitation. Now, I've actually proven that in experiments, that water, once it goes to positive charge, loses magnetic levitation, actually drops in a container that, you know, where there's no evaporation, it actually drops level. So the negative charge is what gives it this magnetic levitation. And I think it's to do with the rearrangement of the molecules, water molecules, into a six-sided crystalline structure. So negative charge water will have a six-sided crystalline structure. Now, I know my water has this six-sided crystalline structure because we've done the test, we've produced the crystal structures of the water. So we have that proof. But also, the reason we drink negative charge water is that the cells in our body operate at their fullest potential with a negative charge. So a cell at a steady state or resting state would be about negative 25 millivolts. To make a new cell, it has to go to negative 50 millivolts. Now, you can only make a new cell at an optimal level if you've got that charge. So once you start depleting the charge of your cells, and your body energy then falls, down towards zero or positive charge, you are in the disease zone. The only thing that's going to protect you from disease is to maintain the negative charge of your cells. And the fastest way to do that is with water, because everyone has to drink water. And we probably drink water multiple times each day, and therefore we're adding electrons. And if it goes through my device, it's going to have, in excess of negative 50 millivolts. So it's going to provide lots of electrons, for cells to keep your cell up there. So the other thing is you can use this negative charge water to cook your food in it. So when food is harvested, it loses its negative charge 60 hours after harvest. This has been, Korokov proved that when a human dies, they lose their negative charge 60 hours after death. I've already proven that this also applies to water when you take it out of its pristine flowing stream. It also applies to fruit and vegetables. So infrared light gives you negative charge. Now, one very simple way to look at this is that your heart operates at a much higher negative charge in your body. It's around about negative 75 to negative 100 millivolts. And this is why your heart will never get cancer. Cancer is never going to attack the organ of highest negative charge in your body. So by deduction, you can conclude that if you keep all your cells at high negative charge, you won't get a disease.
Well, literally, the majority of disease can be linked to dehydration, from my understanding of what I've read, and the majority of people who would say, and I hear this a lot because I'm quite passionate about this when I speak to people who are experiencing any form of health condition. The first thing I'll say is, can you get yourself some spring water, structured spring water, and that opens the door to, most people don't even know what that is out in the community. But then when you look at, and when you open this conversation, people say, well, I drink plenty of water. I drink, my 8 glasses of whatever it is a day. And yet they would still be dehydrated for precisely what you just said. Their cells aren't actually being hydrated, or their body's churning through a lot of energy to structure the water internally.
There's no doubt that dehydration is probably behind 60-odd diseases. And so the way you work out how much water you need is just take your weight in kilos, multiply it by 30. That gives you the number of millivolts, or I should say milliliters of water. You can divide that by 3 or 4. If you divide by 4, you can work out how much water then to drink before breakfast, before lunch, before dinner, and before bed, or 3 times a day, whatever. But dehydration is a massive issue. But also the major issue with dehydration is you're not bringing electrons into your body constantly. So we are a water body. we're primarily water. 99.9% of the molecules in our body are water molecules, and we're over 70% water. So it makes sense that you have to sustain the water body. And we know from science and many work, lots of work, research work been done to show that dehydration can be behind things like high blood pressure, right through to cancer, diabetes.
Alzheimer's as well. I was reading a study
Alzheimer's
yesterday.
And so forth.
Yeah.
So it is a major issue. And I try and sip water throughout the day, but I drink a reasonable amount, before breakfast. It's always best not to drink water in that 1.5 hours after eating, because you'll delete your stomach acid, and that will diminish the unfolding of protein in your stomach to release amino acids and so forth. So, but you've got plenty of time to drink water in between, putting aside the 1.5 hours after eating.
Have you personally?
It is a big issue, but you do need the negative charge in the water to create the hydration potential, because you've got sodium sitting outside your cell drive, now pour them to allow water to come in. And that the whole energy of this happening in your body is driven by negative charge.
What have you seen personally and with people who use your devices? Have you seen, in terms of they've had some sort of illness and they've begun down this path of drinking structured water? Have you seen people reverse things, or like, what's your experience?
Well, I do give people advice about diet and lifestyle, and people do come to see me on this issue. So what I've observed over the years, and while I won't publish this and put it on my website, but what I can tell you is that I've had reports from people who were close to getting stents because of blockages in their arteries, coming back and say 2 years later, and say, my arteries are now crystal clear. My cardiologist just told me my arteries are crystal clear. And they say, I can only put this down to the water. That's the only thing that's changed. So other things we get from people would be, it's lifted the fog from their brain.
Yeah, that's
but
common.
Overall, we're seeing a decrease in health issues overall.
Yeah.
And, just little things like showering this water, women reporting that their hair feels a lot better, their skin feels a lot better. Korokoff told me once that, just showering in this, if you shower in the water as opposed to bathing in it, the water running over your body will take out a lot more positive charge and put in more negative charge. And he uses Curler photography to confirm that. So there's another benefit of, just not only drinking the water, but using it for cooking to restore the negative charge to the water in food and showering.
Yeah.
So that's why the whole of house device is always the best option.
Well, it's interesting too, just from a, it's obviously anecdotal, but when you can go and feel this for yourself. Well, I was just recently in India and went from, most of the cities in India are fairly busy, but went from, horns, cars everywhere, pollution, to a hilltop mountain part of this part of India. And we did a quick walk down to a stream in the mountains where there was running water, and sat by this stream. And I could literally feel myself be calming, my whole central nervous system calming down immediately, and then being recharged. It was like the best way I could describe it is I felt back at home, just being in this environment. And it attests to what you were saying before with the shower water. I felt all the stress and the pollution and whatever else just being washed away. It's not surprising, but it's funny how we people gravitate toward those situations, whether it's the beach or a stream, whatever your thing is, or in the mountains, to get those sense of feelings, and then go back into the madness of a city and wonder why they're not well.
I think it's in our ancestral DNA to go to water and to seek out water. And that's why as a child, I love going the mountains close to me, the Budawangs, and to a waterfall, the Currawong waterfalls. And I was one of 5 boys, and we'd often go down. But just the experience of being under that waterfall and in that pristine water, Um, it's an experience that you never forget. And this is why people are attracted to the ocean or these pristine streams. And when my wife and I go, on holidays, we'd normally go to Tasmania or New Zealand to walk in these pristine areas and drink this pristine water. It's an amazing experience, and you can understand why our ancestors were attracted to this water, because, as you say, it was not only because of the healing effects from drinking the water, it was just the psychological properties that come from the water, of feeling calmness, and and it's just a nice experience to just sit there and have stillness and watching water flow. It's like watching, sitting by a fire and watching the flames, but flowing water has the same effect.
Well, I feel like it resets your brain patterns. It actually rewires your neurochemistry out of these cycles, these looping cycles, and it just like a stream. It flows into the stream and disappears.
Oh, we're all connected, and when you sit by a flowing stream, your whole aura, everything's connected to the aura of the water. In humans, we talk about this experience called love, but it's exactly the same process. We're just connected.
Yeah.
And there's a harmonic or a frequency experience that you get, and that's what flowing water does.
So, Rob, I'd really love to jump in to what people can do at home. So I want to take somebody who doesn't have the access to spring water, but they're aware they need to change their water. They don't want to drink tap water. What's the best way? And we discussed this before jumping on the call. Something that you mentioned in the last podcast, but we didn't go into it. I didn't pick up on it in terms of the issues with filtering water and filtering devices. So I think a good place to start would be there, because the starting point for most people would be, okay, I need to get a water filter. So what are the issues that you see with filtering, say, tap water?
Well, Paul, I get these emails every day.
Yeah.
What are my options?
Yeah.
The answer to that is that, first of all, you need to get to know what the effects are of the systems that you're using and the quality of water that's coming in to your tap. As we mentioned earlier, we're only just finding out the amount of poisons that are in urban water is mind-boggling. That's the first thing. The first reaction of most people is to put a filter on. Well, what I can tell you about filters is there's a law in physics called the first law of thermodynamics. It says you can't destroy matter, you can't destroy energy, you can only change it or transform it to another state or form. So now the filter doesn't do any transformation. It is a rubbish bin for collecting sludge. So now, in that filter, you're building up mass. And as the mass increases, the energy increases. According to Einstein, E equals mc squared, so energy equals mass and energy equals frequency. So now every time you put water through that filter, you are transferring a toxic energy that's accumulated, and we know from some testing, the amount of lead in that filter can be 10 times greater than the amount of lead coming in. But now you're transferring 10 times that amount of energy to your cells. And now your cells are having to work to, first of all, change that positive charge to a negative charge in some way and to detox. So you're now adding an energy load to your body that you shouldn't otherwise have to. And I just say that filters are totally unnecessary. So what you can do, the best thing you can do in that situation with urban water is just put a negative charge on it. The negative charge creates all these properties in water. For example, if you fill up your bathtub with it or fill up a bulk container, you'll see that it's blue in colour. That's one of the first observable things about this water. The other thing it creates is what we call cavitation, where these are very small bubbles that are created that are gases that seem to trap toxins and untangle chemicals and outgas them or turn them back to their elemental form. I mean, you get other properties like high surface tension, but it also has these antioxidant and exclusion zones. So Professor Pollock, famous for describing the exclusion zone capacity of water around your cell. So it says what comes in and what doesn't come in.
Mm.
So when you structure water with a negative charge, you create exclusion zone around the whole container. So it now can hold on to whatever it holds, like minerals, or exclude other things. So what you get is then this transformation going on with chemicals, or taking them back to their elemental form. Now, we're still doing some work on this, and one of them that I'll be doing with a German scientist is we've now got technology to identify the resonant energy or biofrequency of chemicals, either using Krokos devices or others. So you can actually identify that signal, let's say for PFAS or PFOS, which is now in all the city waters of Australia. And you can then put that through the device, and we can then, using the same technology, detect if there's a change in that signal at the other end. Now, I know there's going to be. it's going to come out flat. So, and that is because those elements have gone back, those chemicals have gone back to their elemental form. Now, science is always evolving, and we've still got to produce more proof, but there's substantial proof already that this is what the water is doing. So I think the best option is you just install an MEA device, in line. So if you've got a house, you put an in-line device from the meter to the house. Or if you're in an apartment, there's ones you can put under the sink or on your shower. And then you've got the bottle top device, if you're traveling, and if you've got other liquids like wine, whiskey, milk,
essentials.
Juice,
Yeah,
you can put those through. So we already know there's a massive change in the taste of wine when you put it through, because it outgasses the pesticides and all the other chemicals they put into water, and you end up with a wine that's very smooth and nice tasting.
Just for my Neanderthal brain, when you're structuring the tap water through one of your devices, giving it a negative charge, and the chemicals the harmful chemicals are in that water, and then you structure it to a negative charge. How is it then, as you said, returning it to its elemental form? How is that lessening its impact on your body? Is it just...
Yeah, well, there's a big difference. If you take the chemical formula of fluoridation, so we know that the powder of fluoridation is made up of, basically at an elemental form, of fluoride, silica, and sodium. And you put all those together, they're bonded together to form what we know as fluoridation. People can Google the formula of it, but basically that's what it is. So they're bonded together. Now, what water does in a pristine stream, and it does in my device, is it just breaks the bond between the fluoride, the silica, and the sodium.
Yeah. And
the sodium and the fluoride breaks that bond. So there's three bonds that are broken basically there. Well, there could be multiple, depending on, multiples of elements, but it just breaks those bonds. But so now in the water, you've got fluoride, silica, and sodium. Now, I'm not quite sure if it converts the fluoride back to fluorine or not, but those elements in your body are then harmless. What is harmful is fluoridation. And the energy of that fluoridation, as with chlorination and the aluminum and everything else they throw into water, plus all the things that are coming in through the catchment, that chemical energy is still coming through to your cells with a filter. That's the difference. So my device is a transformer. It's actually transforming through a change of polarity the energy of the water back to its natural state. We're just doing what water does in nature.
just naturally cleaning itself. Could you say though, because the other argument I hear is that these filters are removing microplastics, which is a major problem. Could you say, is that do you think that's true? And B, if it is true, then could you then filter your water and then structure it afterwards to run it through a?
Well, I think people probably don't realise that there are microplastics in the air. You've only got to scrape out the bottom of your butter container that might be plastic with a metal container, and you're taking in some microplastics. So
yeah, it's inescapable.
Microplastics are coming into our body in multiple ways. So what does the body do with them? Well, they're now finding they're finding them in the brains of people, microplastics. What I say is that you probably should avoid plastic as much as possible, but it's near impossible these days to avoid that. If you're traveling and you want a reasonable water, you buy it in plastic.
Yeah,
the main thing is to keep your body healthy. You keep your body healthy by drinking structured water and any other way to increase electrons, like cooking your food in structured water, getting infrared light, wherever you can from sunlight or whatever means, from sauna or whatever, and grounding yourself on the earth. So the healthier your body is, the higher the voltage of your body, the better your detox system. The human body is a perfectly designed filter and detox system. That's why we have a liver. So you've got 5 litres of your blood going through your liver 38 times a day for detoxing. It's the reason we have kidneys. The kidneys are your rubbish bins for, as long as you're drinking enough water and you're hydrated, you get rid of these toxins. And also we've got lungs, for example, to get rid of carbon dioxide, and we can detox out through our skin, through our hair, our urine, our bowel. We've got a whole range of elimination systems. But again, those systems only work well when you're healthy.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing. It's crazy how complicated we've made health when really we've got a machine where we substances go in one hole and come out another. And so it's your lymphatic, your drainage, the cleanness of your blood and acids. And if you're out of balance in any one of those areas, you're going to be ill. Whereas if you're continually cleansing the system with structured water, clean foods, there's no reason you should be getting sick.
Oh, precisely. And look, I'm 76 and I can't remember the last time I really got sick.
Yeah.
My wife's the same. And we just live a fairly clean diet. We grow as much food as we can. We live in out in the Australian bush where we've got clean air. I've got my own water. I've got my own groundwater bores. And, you can do this. So at any age, you can be healthy as long as you know the regime. And this is why we run workshops here to teach people about health and well-being, because that's the starting point. The water is just one part of the package. It's the most important part of the package because of our water body. But, yeah, the quality of food that we put in there to maintain our immune system, lymphatic system, you got to have movement. For that to move, you've got to be able to move. So there's a whole range of things, but water is the most important.
Well, I can tell. Because as I mentioned, I was just in India, and the last part of that trip was in Delhi, which I think would be classifiable as the worst air quality in the world. As you don't want to look at the toxicity meter before you fly in, like I did, because it's like, Jesus Christ, it's just like it's in the red zone, far in the red, and even the poor trees there have just a layer of silts and pollution on them, and they're all draped over with the weight of it. But I'm just fanatical about, and I didn't do anything in particular, but I was fine. I didn't do anything. The main thing I always do is make sure I'm structuring my water. And look, I had to make do. I had plastic bottles. It was all that was available. It was just some plastic filtered water that was there. And look, God, I'm lucky to have that when a lot of people there don't even have that. But just structuring it, and I was completely fine. So it's amazing what the
Yep.
body can withstand moving when you give it the right nutrients to continually allow itself to detoxify.
Oh, yes. Look, I think we don't really understand the full benefit of what water actually does in your body. You know, it can actually surround your DNA. You know, it protects protein transport in your blood.
Mm.
You know, but most important is protecting your DNA from outside influences that can activate your genetic malfunctions. So we all have propensities for something, but there's got to be a trigger. So we know by drinking structured water, and I'm not the only one saying this, there are many other scientists who say this, that structured water protects the DNA from outside influences. But importantly also, it surrounds your collagen. So your collagen, it's in your body as extensive as your cardiovascular system. And its collagen is the major protein in your body. So it's what protects you from all disease. So you don't want to deplete your collagen pathways. And the way I do it is I just have, we do slow cooked meats every week, like a whole chicken or lamb leg, like this morning I had lamb broth. I try and have a cupful of that every day. But you cook it in structured water. And so it's all these little things that you do, in your daily routine that you actually protect the cells. And the cells need to be protected with the energy of structured water by supplying them with these electrons and so forth. For example, your blood, most people now know that the heart is not a pump. So it sits at this angle, off-centered by about 36 degrees. It's got 4 chambers and it vortexes the blood out around your body. So that vortex is critical, but it's maintained by the energy of water. So what actually carries your water out to a capillary where it does a U-turn? So a pump in your heart can't do that. It can't do a U-turn at a capillary. So the water's then got to come back, or the blood's got to come back. But your blood is 83% water, and it's the energy in water that enables the movement of nutrients and oxygen around your body. So again, that energy is being sustained by drinking structured water, because that's where it's getting its electrons, its electrical charge. And as long as you're having enough salt, because the body, we are like a battery in that respect, that we require salts or electrolytes to enable this energy to be created as well. So, but the water is again the key to it.
Another hack too, I find when I'm traveling, particularly if you can get access to fresh fruits, because the water in the structured water isn't there within fresh fruits.
Yes. So. What we do, whenever we buy fruit, we always sit it in the structured water. It will then entrain. This is a process or property of physics which is called entrainment. So the negative charge will always go to the source of the lowest negative charge. So you'll get some equalizing of charge across the two bodies. So the water will give to the fruit or veggies a negative charge. So as I said earlier, when you harvest an apple off the tree, 60 hours later, the water in that fruit or vegetable has turned to a positive charge. You can entrain it back by just putting it into structured water. We do that with any fruit and veggies we buy, because we know they're 60 hours after harvest when we buy them. But obviously we don't do that when we take fruit and veggies from our property. We eat them on the same day.
How long do people need to leave, say, the fruit in the negatively charged water for that effect?
Yeah, it depends on, like an apple that's got a skin on it, probably 2 hours. We would normally put them in the sink overnight, just leave them there overnight while we're sleeping. But something like celery, where it's been cut, you put it within about 2 hours. It's the charge has gone fully back into the celery.
Hmm.
So it could be that we put too much stuff in the refrigerator. We need these little vases set up around the kitchen table with our celery and our grapes and other things in them, sitting in the structured water and just charging them up and eating them.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty clear the benefit. I don't think you've got a wrinkle on your face from this.
Yeah, well, I think skin health has got a lot to do with water.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny how people think that's a shallow metric for your overall health, but you can tell by the clarity of someone's eyes and the clarity of their skin what their internal organs, particularly their liver and kidneys, as you said, for flushing toxins, because they're the first things that come out in your skin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's for sure. Yeah. Look, I've been fortunate. I've been drinking my structured water for over 12 years now.
Mm.
And I do see the difference because I can compare my skin, 10 years ago through photos.
Yeah.
And there's been no degradation in that time.
I actually think you can have regeneration. If I think of I think my skin's better now than what it was 10 years ago. Because when I was just drinking, drinking tap water and not eating a particularly clean diet. So.
Oh, yes. As I said, it's these little daily practices that you get into, little routines, of when you drink water or the water you drink, the food that you eat. Like I always start with a large breakfast, and then lunch is a bit smaller. Lunch is like a poke bowl salad, and dinner would be smaller still. The other thing is going to bed early. I go to bed at 8:30. I always have.
Yeah, well,
and I've had 53 years of married life of going to bed at 8:30 and getting up early of a morning. So I like to get the red light in my eyes of a morning. So my wife and I are out there walking with the dogs, at sunrise. So this enables that red light to activate the tryptophan, which looks after my hormone system, and all is happy after that.
They're just basic practices which I guess are putting us back into the natural rhythm of the planet. And it's sad to see when you go to big cities where I heard something incredibly depressing about how there are people now who will never see the stars because of the light pollution in these large cities. You're lucky to see the moon. So our direct connection with some celestial body is so important for our overall well-being. And we've designed cities where we can't even see the night sky.
Well, I think our ancestors got a good dose of not only sunlight, but starlight and moonlight.
Yeah.
I know from my bedroom, I can look out and see the full star, the Southern Cross and, the Milky Way. And it's a brilliant sight. But I know there are cities in Europe where you can't see the stars. You can't even hear birds singing out. But, this afternoon, I'll be sitting out on the deck near my pond here with my wife and, we'll be listening to birds and frogs. There's also cicadas singing out here at the moment, but they'll be gone within a few weeks. But, it's just having some stillness, listening to the sounds of nature.
There's certainly... And for people who can't access that, there are so many now devices which can certainly help, whether that's an infrared light that you can get for your house. You can put on music of natural sounds which can calm your central nervous system. And then the other thing we were discussing briefly before we jumped on with scalar technology, which is harmonizing within your house basically natural frequencies which are good for healing for syntropic environments within your system. So there's a lot you can do.
This is something that I do, Paul. I have a number of devices. Whatever I'm drinking, I can put it on near these devices or on these devices to get frequency. You can set it at, whatever frequency you like. But we did some experimental work in Germany. So we put water through the device that was entrained with the frequency. And there was certainly a change in the crystal structure. It became more complex. So one thing we need to think about in structured water, you can get very basic structured water. Like, for example, water will always try and get back to its natural state. So you can put into water things like crystals and gemstones and so forth and get like a very faint sort of crystal structure. Not very complex, what I'd call basic. Then you put it through my device and you get a very complex crystal structure. And if you then go and add frequencies, the beneficial ones, you'll then get something even more complex. So there's a scale, in a way, of structure in the water. And I think water in nature is always trying to achieve its highest level of complexity. So along its pathway, through the vortexing and its exposure to sun energy, starlight, moonlight, the singing of the birds and the fish in the water and, all the microbes and everything else, the environment there is complex. So you can imagine the frequencies that water has in a pristine state. And our ancestors must have had amazing frequency inputs to their body by drinking this water. But we can do it these days, and you can put structured water out into the sun or moonlight, which I certainly recommend. But as you say, you can buy the scalar frequencies now, and you can zap your water with frequency to increase its complexity. It won't be too long before we're putting in frequencies for healing. I think we're already there, and I've seen some evidence of this in my travels with other scientists, that there are frequencies that, we can use to heal conditions. And the best way to deliver those frequencies to your body is with water.
I've seen studies on just sound therapy, for example, certain frequencies destroying cancer cells.
Yeah.
And what's highly frustrating, it's been known about for at least over a decade, and yet there's why aren't we seeing it? Why aren't we seeing it everywhere? Yeah, it's we know why. That's rhetorical.
We're living in an era now, Paul, where we have to take responsibility ourselves. We can't rely on others to be responsible. Our bodies are self-regulating, self-healing systems. We are the cure. So if you don't take responsibility, then you're going to get a disease. And if you don't know how to cure yourself, you're in big trouble.
It's also
you need the knowledge.
You need the knowledge, and it's also, if anyone listened before and thought, well, and they look at infrared devices, or they look at a scalar machine, or they look at structuring water device, and they think, well, that's all expensive. Get sick, and you'll see how expensive being sick is. Like, it pales in comparison. This is consider this your healthcare fund and your preventative medicine fund, and it will save you tens and tens of, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars over being ill.
Prevention is better than cure. And you're right, the cost of prevention is considerably lower than the cures or those things proposed by the medical system, which will just make you sicker. So, people just need, I think there's an increasing awareness that people do need to take responsibility for themselves and acquire the necessary knowledge about water and food. As you said earlier, you've only got to decide what to put in your mouth, and your body does the rest. Your body can generate 1 billion pieces of information a second for regulation and healing. You've just got to think about the quality that you're consuming, including the quality of your sunlight and your grounding, with the earth, and your experiences in nature or with other people. Because they're all influences. You can decide on the energy coming out of your body, what comes in and what goes out. You can make that decision. But part of that is deciding on what environment you want to live in, and what do you want to expose to your energy, your body energy. Because we're all emitting this light energy all the time. And, there's a lot of discussion now about how structured water helps to sustain that energy. because you don't want any gaps in that energy, because they're just pathways for all sorts of things coming into your body. So again, this is why I run workshops on this, to just give people information so that they're aware about their environment, what they put into their mouth by way of water and food, and having an experience. We also on this property here have a labyrinth, so people can actually get used to the idea of grounding, of walking the labyrinth barefooted and having that experience of stillness, like a walking meditation, to get that experience. So, yeah, but it all gets back to you, people having choices and making decisions about their life.
It's a very big topic when you start getting into, the toxicity of thoughts and the toxicity of the information diet that people are on. And we just had a significant election yesterday, and you can see people on both sides losing their minds for not getting their way, and all the polarity we see in the world. And for me, I just look at that and think of the toxicity of that you're engaging in terms of your own. You might be living a completely fine life, but you're choosing to jump on YouTube and download, or Twitter, and get annoyed at people on the other side of the world. But the thing I love so much about simply changing your water, making the decision that I'm just going to buy a structuring device. I don't necessarily believe Rob or Paul, but I'm just going to buy this device and try it. That is a gateway, because when you clean up your water, you become aware of so many other things. It's like your consciousness begins to open for you, and you start to become more aware of what you're actually engaging in. So all the other parts which culminate in our health, whether it's negative, in engaging in negative dialogues with people you don't know, or your own negative self-talk, that can all be somewhat alleviated with changing water.
Yeah, this is right. There is no doubt, and in my workshops and in my PowerPoint on water, I do cover this area of consciousness. I personally think that water has the highest level of consciousness. Conscious meaning awareness, followed by microbes, followed by plants, followed by animals, and humans are at the bottom of the tree in terms of awareness or human consciousness.
Yeah.
So, and this again, when you have that appreciation, changes your connection with the earth. We are the earth. I mean, we live on this earth, but we're actually, if you break the human body down, we're just made up of elements from the earth, including water. So we're actually grounded in the earth already. But I think this association we have with nature is very grounding. And as you said, when people get involved in deeply into politics, where it causes fractions within families, within communities, and across a nation, this is a sign of sickness. They've lost the plot. And unfortunately, we don't have that at that extent in Australia. Thank God for that.
We're too disinterested. We're just like, whatever, mate. Just leave me alone.
Well, it could be. But there are times when you just got to turn off the television sometimes and perhaps just use the media for education and learning.
Yeah.
Which is what I do. I don't use it for entertainment. I'm trying to learn or get further information, and I use it. It's a very good medium for that purpose. But why people want to get tangled up in politics and all of that is when there's more interesting things to do in life to better yourself. But again, it's all to do with this awareness, this consciousness. And most people who have a higher level of consciousness, or they've expanded their aura, usually don't get involved in these things. They know that it's not worth it to them, because there's only bad stuff comes in and it causes division.
It's also it's a nuanced discussion, but I was going to say it's also people, as much as governments seem to change in the West, nothing ever seems to change, unless people change. So
Yes.
you're still waiting. It's a savior complex. You're waiting for whoever it is now who's going to come and make everything better. Yet, where in that is your responsibility to change yourself?
Yes, and I think, if you look at the elections in the US, I think that reflects a community that's desperate for some change.
Hmm.
And and anyone who is prepared to put up their hand and say, I'm going to change the system completely, whatever
Hmm.
way, they're in there. They say, right, we'll go with this person because they're prepared to make a change because, the cost of living's too high, or
Hmm.
we're getting not the right sort of water or the right sort of food, and so forth. So, um, they don't have too many choices. It's whoever puts up their hand says, I'll make the greatest change. So they go that way. And
Hmm.
it's it's a it's a sorry state of affairs that we have to come to that. I mean, you can end up having the lunatics running the asylum with that approach.
Well, I think that's exactly what we have. Look, it's so complicated. It certainly, yeah. Look, it feels that the all I'll say is when you travel a lot and you meet people from everywhere, different, completely the what would seemingly be the opposite form of culture from yours, or it
Yeah.
actually literally is the opposite form of culture, and all of these things, and then you begin to talk with people and you spend time in an area, you realize they're human beings and you've got so much in common. It's ridiculous, like unbelievably, like 95% of your life is has parallels between someone you never met on the other side of the planet, and that's an incredibly
Yes.
beautiful thing. And I think focusing on how we can actually bridge those gaps and work on these things which are common to all of us, rather than screaming over petty topics to
Yeah.
divide us. And that begins with us choosing to do that within, as you said, within our own families and friendship groups, rather than arguing, like what can we find common ground on, and then implement in our own lives rather than expecting someone else to go out there and do that. And it's not to say, I think there's, you said with big water and all these things, there's huge structural issues with the current way uh, the world is set up. It was set up in an unconscious manner by people who are predominantly focused on profit. But if you can at least spread information, change your own water in your own house, if you've got that capability, that you're changing people around you, because you will start. People must come to you all the time and ask you what you're doing for your health, and you can say, "Well, let me tell you," and that becomes a grassroots movement which is unstoppable.
Yes. And it's these daily decisions that you make, or the choices that you have,
Mm,
which really determine the ultimate outcome.
mm,
And I think people, it's too easy to drift or to rely on someone else. So, suddenly you find that you've got a hero somewhere and you've got to follow that hero. And,
mm.
without even knowing where they're going to lead you, you keep following,
Yeah.
and, there's got to be a leader inside of us. You've got to lead yourself and start to make leadership decisions for your life, you know, starting with water and diet and lifestyle.
Mm,
I think when you do that and you're concentrated in that area, you do increase your consciousness and your awareness of what's going on in the rest of the world.
mm,
But there's a lot of positive things, really. If you go looking for them,
mm,
you can find spaces where you can live happily.
mm,
I'm happy where I live at the moment and what I'm doing, and I've got no desire to sort of give up on this and pursue it, and the knowledge, and that's why I go to these conferences and meet with these other scientists,
mm.
because there's always something to learn, and to share then with other people. Then I get can get my staff excited about other experiments we're going to do and pursue those. So yeah, it's I think we've got some big challenges coming up, and I think for people it's worth reflecting on what's happening at the political level, um, because I think politicians are just not informed. They're run by bureaucrats,
Mm.
and the bureaucrats are run by the lobbyists, which is
Robert.
where the profit comes in. So the entry into politics to change things is just not there. I can tell you, Paul, I've tried this. 20 years ago in my business, I was spending a bit of time with politicians. At that stage, I developed a new technique of mapping salinity in Australia. At that stage, the going science was that it was all to do with rising groundwater. I found it wasn't. The salt was moving laterally, and for a whole range of reasons. Anyway, I had a meeting with a politician, did a PowerPoint presentation, showed him all my science, the mapping, and about how salinity was working in the landscape. And I said, well, what do you think about that? He said, Robert, I think you're absolutely right. And I said, well, what are you going to do about it? And he said, nothing. And I said, why not? He said, because I have to take the advice of my scientific advisors. Well, I know the scientific advisors are running all sorts of agendas to support their funding, supported by, industry lobbyists. So the idea that you can crash through that area is, it's near impossible. It's the same with structured water. See, structured water is not taught at any university in Australia.
It's the opposite. It's demonized and called. I mean, they throw that term pseudoscience on your Wikipedia page, and to discredit, they call anything that falls outside of what they believe is pseudoscience. And then you look these people up, and they never look like happy or healthy people.
No, and you'll find that they're professors at university who most of the research funding and their salary is coming from a corporation.
Yeah.
So I know in Australia that back in the 1970s, the head of the Treasury, then John Stone, convinced then I think Gough Whitlam to make sure to get the universities to get 30 or 40% of their money from outside, from industry. Well, if you're the Vice Chancellor of a university, you're not going to ask Rob Gourlay for some money. You're going to go and ask, someone from a big corporation. And then the big corporations then run the research agendas. And this is what's happened. So now the professors are just messaging what the corporation wants. And that then leads to them publicly demeaning anything to do with structured water, because they say it's all about the chemistry. Water is just H2O. It's an inert solid, nothing more, nothing less. That's all it is. Well, it's also like saying, the human body is 99.9% water, right? So we don't say that we are just H2O and an inert solid, do we? Because the human body, we have thoughts, we have intuition, and we have a whole range of spiritual or conscious capacities beyond. But you might say, well, where's it come from? And I think it comes from water in our body. But if you just treat water as H2, it's two molecules of H2O and some inert solid, you'll never really understand water, and you'll therefore never understand the human body and how water works in the human body.
But for me, it's like they've not even looked at the science. When I read some of these papers, which I have, I'm like, you've not even looked at this. Like, you're dismissing this without even properly researching it. Because one of the main things which is so easily debunked, I read where one of the researchers said, or these professors said, that structured water dissipates within a picosecond. So even if you structure it through a device, it doesn't maintain the structure. So that's why it's all pseudoscience. And you're like, well, how then do you explain the crystallography, which you can freeze and look at from a stream, and that's crystal, and I can do the same with my tap water at home, and it's got a completely different geometrical shape. How is that then be sustained for however long? And now I can do that for days and days on end. And it's like you've literally not even done this in your own lab, and you've got an opinion on it, which I just find that's the most closed-minded thing I've ever seen.
All right, I mean, I've got water here, Paul, that I put a negative charge into it back in 2012. In a large 1,000-litre container. That water, the charge of it the negative charge has actually increased from around about negative 75 millivolts up to 150. Now, that seems to be the saturation point. So this is 12 years later, and it's still got a negative charge in it, so it's still structured. and it's still blue in colour. You know, so I've got proof that the structure is permanent. You're right. These people say the structure will disappear within like seconds or at most within 3 days. Well, mine's there permanently. There's only a couple of things we know that actually knock it out. We know that it reverts to a positive charge if you put it in a microwave or close to a microwave oven. And second, we know that reverse osmosis filters turn it to positive charge. So we know that. So, water is, it does have its weaknesses, of course, but it's mainly due to radiation. And now, that would tell you something about the water in your body too, if you're about microwaves and, and radiation.
You're making me worried about all the flying I've done recently.
Well, I've done a bit too.
Yeah. Well, I always, I always feel sorry for my water or food or whatever it is when it has to go through the extra X-ray, and then you've got to walk through that. It's just, I used to ask if I could go around it, but now it's just so busy to do that at when you're running for flights. It's just like, oh God, I just say Hail Mary and walk through.
Yes.
Rob, I just want to. So look, what people can't. So the best advice, if you can't get access to spring water and then structure it, is just to structure the tap water, and that's going to certainly help.
I think that is the fallback position.
Yeah. What's your gold standard though? Is your gold standard to get? So could you even get, say, spring water delivered? Is that if that's possible for you, that and then structure it as the gold standard?
I even have people who travel from Sydney with 1,000 litre containers and come down and we just pump it out of the bore for them. I mean, some people will do, fortunately will go out of their way to get a high quality water. So, and I think, if people really put their mind to it, they'll be able to find good sources of pristine water or structured water. So you just got to have a think about it, where you might be able to go to a pristine stream, to get this water.
Or thoroughly. I mean, there are companies, certainly in Australia, there's companies just that facilitate just about everywhere. You just got to do your research and question, find out where they're actually getting that from.
Oh, yes. There are some bottled waters that are spring water.
Yeah.
What you need to know is whether they've been treated. So if they've been through reverse osmosis, then it's got a high positive charge. Then you've got to put it through my device to revert it back to negative. But then you've got to spend, the water's got to spend a lot of energy moving it from high positive charge back to negative.
Yeah.
You're always better starting from a water that, has very low positive charge, and then you'll maximise the negative charge with my device.
Robert, is there anything I haven't asked you that you want to finish with?
Look, I think we've covered a lot of ground, and as we discussed, I'll send you some slides in the PowerPoint, which you can edit into this to give better explanation.
Yeah, I might put those in the show notes actually for people as well who are listening on. Just because Rob's got a fantastic visuals on everything we've been discussing that you can see, which I think just helps you really help me get my head around, and I've shown it to other people. Particularly when you met just quickly with the Kirlian photography, when you look at the light coming off the body, when you look at the images taken of, say, just normal tap water, and it's a very low auric field that you can see from this Kirlian photography. Then you see certain kinds of water which are higher quality, and the light body is just stretching so much further out.
Yes, Korokov shows this in a lot of his presentation. He shows just normal urban water.
Yeah.
And using Kirlian photography, and it's a very small light energy. Then structures the water, and the Kirlian, the light energy coming from structured water is much broader and wider and more complex. But one little experiment people can do that I show in a lot of my presentations and workshop is you can get some blueberries, put them into a glass container with structured water, and in another one, just use normal urban water. So leave the lids on Now separate them, because if you put them too close to each other, the structured water one will then train energy into the destructured one. So you've got to keep them well away from each other, like at least 5 or 6 meters away from each other, and just watch how they progress over time. Because the one with the structured water should stay crystal clear. And I've got blueberries in containers after 7 or 8 years of being there. The blueberries look as pristine as the day I put them in there, just being in the structured water. And the ones that are in the urban water are broken up, and there's mold forming and bits of sludge floating around. But I do have people around the globe now doing this experiment and getting exactly the same results. And it's a very good demonstration of the difference between what structured water is doing to the cells in your body as opposed to urban water.
Yeah. Well, the proof is lived by you in terms of, your mental acuity and your physical health. When a lot of people around your age, if you watch them, they're degrading basically, and they just expect that's normal. So
that's right.
Yeah. Look, Rob, thank you for your time again, and for all the work you're doing, and I'm so thankful for your devices.
And I thank you very much for this opportunity.
No, absolute pleasure. And I'll put all the links to the show notes with those notes and how to find your incredible, all different kinds of devices, where there's something for everybody.
Yes.
And I think I'm going to have to get a home device after this conversation. Thank you, Rob.
Okay, Paul.
Cheers.